Welcome back to the Sports Fix, and I'm delighted to now welcome a newcomer on board to the Sports Fix. He is affectionately known as Dadsy, Eddie Dads from scplaybook.com.au. That's the Super Coach website. He's our new Australian and North American sports guru here on The Flow. Delighted to welcome Dadsy to the show. Dadsy, how you doing?
Hey, Alice, thank you very much for having me. It's an honour to be here.
It's great to have you on. Based in Sydney at the moment is Eddie Dads. He's across sport like no other, and particularly when it comes to the AFL. Now, Dadsy, just looking at some pre-season results as everyone starts to really get excited with the AFL being just around the corner, and by God, have we missed it. We'll go back to last Wednesday when your Bombers were in action. They beat the Bulldogs 81-75. Now, just off the top here, I know AFL pre-season is nothing to really sort of indicate what's going to go on when the regular season comes around, but nevertheless, it's always an interesting insight to see certain teams getting up when they're probably not expected to. Can we say that about the Bombers?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about, Alice. I've booked my grand final tickets already, mate. That was a really impressive performance from the boys, and it was great to see a few of the young guys like Will Snelling stood up. Nick Martin and Tex Wanganeen, who have been added to the Bombers list, were really good when they came on, and all the stars were really good for us too. Andrew McGrath, a half-back, looks like that's going to be a bit of a revelation, and Darcy Parish through the midfield. So I was really encouraged by the Bombers' performance, and I think the Dogs, they were sort of operating at half rat power. I feel like they didn't really get out of second gear. So a win's better than nothing, but yeah, not too much to take out of it at this stage.
Loves his Bombers, does Eddie Dads. I reckon the last time they won a grand final, he might have still been in nappies. But we'll move across to Carlton, and with the Blues, Dadsy, there's been a lot of meme culture surrounding their pre-season. The typical kind of fanfare that gets floated when it comes to Carlton fans being a little bit premature about their team's hope. They defeated St Kilda on this occasion 67-60, a slender one, but Carlton fans, is there a reason for them to be optimistic going into the 2022 AFL season?
To be honest, I don't think either of these two teams will be contending when it gets to the end of the season, but there were good signs from Carlton. Adam Cerra would have been really exciting if you're a Carlton fan. He obviously came across from Freo in the off-season. And the other one was Paddy Cripps. I really like the look of it. It looks like he struggled a bit with injury last year, but it does look like he is on the mend, and he was fantastic. In terms of St Kilda, I'm not sure their team's in great shape. They've still got a few to come back in, but I think if you're a Carlton fan, it was definitely more encouraging than if you're a St Kilda fan.
Now, there's certainly no pre-season hangover if you're a Demons fan. A comfortable day out against North Melbourne here. I guess everyone expects Melbourne to be right up there this year, Dadsy, but for North, there's been some lean years, and when I say there's been a few, there's been a lot over the last 10 years. Pre-season, as far as that goes, it doesn't look like it's going to be any brighter for North fans this year.
Well, this result actually surprised me a little bit. Obviously, Melbourne are the better team, but I did think North made some strides at the end of last year, and they obviously picked up a couple of really handy ins over the off-season. Jason Horne-Francis being the number one pick, of course. I think I'm just going to have to put this one down to a bit of inexperience. They didn't have Luke McDonald and Aaron Hall, who were both missing with injuries. A little bit disappointing. The big plus was obviously Horne-Francis, who, particularly in the second half, was outstanding. Melbourne, just business as usual. The stars were great. Oliver and Petrarca and Max Gawn was excellent. They're going to be very hard to beat again this year, the Demons.
We've got a few Crows fans in the building, Dadsy, and they certainly were not up and about last Friday after the result against Brisbane Lions. Now, we know the Crows had a fairly decent finish to their season last time out, and they've certainly been on the rough end of a few hammerings in the past couple of years, going all the way back to, I guess, that infamous grand final loss, but a very, very, very unflattering day out against Brisbane.
It was indeed. I think the Crows are just going to have to calibrate their expectations this year. They're not going to be pushing for finals, but they do have a lot of young talent, which will be really exciting to watch. Harry Schonberg, Josh Rochelle playing in his first AFL season looked fantastic. Matt Crouch was thereabouts. He's coming off a really long injury layoff, so he's building into it. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near the top 8, the Crows, but it is good to see the kids play. The likes of Riley Philcorp as well, also very exciting. For Brisbane, they were super impressive. Jared Berry and Zach Bailey, particularly, the two young midfielders they've got that are just pushing into the midfield a bit more. Cam Rayner too. I think Brisbane will be definitely contending for that top four position at the end of the year.
Now, on the other end of town, when it comes to South Australians getting around their footy, Port Adelaide, has Ken Hinkley come out and made some premature comments? Because we know he's really put the pressure on himself and obviously his players, saying that he feels that the side has the calibre to go all the way this year after so many close finishes, but not quite getting there over that final hurdle. They went down again, did Port Adelaide, to Gold Coast of all teams. Should Port fans be overly worried about this one?
Not just yet, but I think you are right. Hinkley has created a lot of pressure on himself, and he does need to do well this year. Port, the Gold Coast actually looked quite good. They were rebounding really quickly off half-back. They've got so much young talent that it just enables them to move the ball quickly, and it looks like Stewie Dew might be taking the sort of training wheels off them a bit this year, which would be good. Matt Rao, Took Miller, they were fantastic. Alex Davies, who's a young 19-year-old, is really good for them. For Port, not their best outing, and a couple of really serious injuries as well. Sam Taupepper went down, as did Scott Lysette. So not good signs there. On the plus side, Zach Butters is really good in the midfield, and Josh Sinn, one of their draftees, looks like he might play round one off half-back. He's a lovely left footer. So there are positives there. I wouldn't overreact too quickly if you're a Port fan.
Our AFL guru today, Eddie Dads, on the flow. Dadsy, we'll just rattle off some other results, and then I'm going to ask you about who you fancy this year in the AFL. We did have a draw between Collingwood and Hawthorn, a high-scoring draw, 141 each. We had the Giants beating Sydney in the derby there in Sydney, and this one was actually played in one of our service areas there at the Lavington Sports Ground in Albury. We also had Fremantle smashing West Coast. Very, very disappointing result if you're an Eagles fan, which some of our listeners will recall. I certainly am one of them. And Geelong, they lost to Richmond 110-92. So that ties into my next question, Dadsy. Who do you see as a shoo-in for the top four this year? Because, the AFL in recent years has had an element of difficult kind of competition to predict. So how do you see it unfolding in 2022?
I'm not going to go too out of the box here, Alice. I think I've mentioned a couple of teams already that I think will be right up there. Melbourne, the Bulldogs, and Brisbane, I think, would be my locks for the top four. Then I think that fourth spot is in a little bit of jeopardy. Port Adelaide, obviously, were in there last year. I do think that's up for grabs, and I really wouldn't be surprised to see the likes of a Sydney or even an Essendon step up and take that fourth position on the ladder.
Do you reckon, just off the top here, Dadsy, a question without notice, do you think that the AFL will be taking serious note of what's been happening with other codes with regards to close contact rules with COVID and seriously trying to implement a system whereby they can negate all these games being postponed? Because it's been a massive issue across the summer in the Australian sporting landscape, hasn't it?
I would certainly hope they've been taking some notes on what to do, and I suspect that there will be playing games every week this year by hell or high water. I'd be very surprised if we see any postponements due to COVID this year, which I think is ultimately a good thing, whether that comes from having to pick up players from the state leagues or whatever it is. I don't think they'll be cancelling games this year, which is a very good thing for the fans.
Most certainly, here's to hoping. Now, there are rumours surrounding someone that you certainly grew up idolising, that being James Hird, the Bombers legend. There's been apparently a rumour that's surfaced today which suggests that he may well become the next GWS coach. How do you see this one panning out?
Yeah, I think first reported by Mark Robinson in the Herald Sun, that Hirdy's a big chance of taking over from Leon Cameron at some point, indeterminate in the future. And I think it's a great thing. I obviously love Hirdy as a player. He was a very good tactical and coach. Say what you will about what else occurred during that time, but he does know footy extremely well, and I'm just glad to see that he's back in doing what he loves, involved in the AFL.
We'll head across to North America, Dadsy. I know the NBA is close to your heart. We had some results happen across today, Sunday in North America, Monday our time here in Australia. My Knicks getting done by the 76ers, the Suns losing to the Jazz, the Pacers getting up over the Celtics. We had the Hornets very narrowly going down to the Detroit Pistons, the Rockets also very narrowly losing to the Clippers, and in some other results we had the Golden State Warriors losing at home to the Mavericks, and also the Nuggets getting up over the Trailblazers. Now, there are very few people that follow the NBA more closely than you do. How do you see this year panning out in the NBA?
Well, it's super interesting, Alice. And I think a few of the results today are actually really telling. The first one being that 76ers win over the Knicks. The 76ers look terrifying with James Harden and Joel Embiid. They are so hard to stop. They get so many free throws. Embiid shot 27 free throws today. James Harden had a triple-double. They look like they've meshed together perfectly. So that's pretty scary for the Eastern Conference. And then over on the other side, the Mavericks taking down the Warriors is a really big result too. The Warriors actually gave up a 26-1 run in the final quarter, which they just don't do. Thanks to the ESPN stats and info on Twitter, that was the first 20-point lead they've blown in regulation in a regular season game, November 14, 2007. So they just don't give up big leads. And I think the Draymond Green being out for the Warriors is really hurting them. So they need him to come back. The other big result there was the Jazz getting over the Suns. And similarly, they really missed Chris Paul, the Suns. You could see it in that late game situation. Jay Crowder committed a really bad turnover. In that situation, normally it just goes to Chris Paul and he makes the right decision. So injuries are really hurting the Western Conference teams. And in the East, it's wide open with the 76ers starting to come really into shape.
There you go, folks. And I guess we'll go around the world here, Dadsy, over into Eastern Europe. And there's obviously some very escalating geopolitical tensions unfolding there at the moment. Now, in a very roundabout way, I want to ask you how the world moves forward in a sporting sense when it comes to Russia. We've seen various teams in at least the football code. There's obviously been I believe, a Grand Prix cancelled as well. The UEFA Champions League set to have been played in Moscow this year. That's been cancelled too. And we now have Poland and Czech Republic in the World Game saying that they would prefer to boycott their fixtures against Russia when it comes to qualifying for the 2022 World Cup. It's all a bit of a mess, Dadsy, but if you can find a way to give us a roundabout answer here, how do you think the world kind of approaches Russia when it comes to all these sanctions? Are they enough? And when it comes to, I guess, team sports as well, being more punished than the individual athletes competing in their relative games, is that all kind of fair at the moment?
Well, it's a tough question, Alison. It's a tough situation. I want to make very clear that I'm no geopolitical expert, but I do think that sport in general can play a really big role in these situations, and I think it's almost underrated. And straight off the top of my head, when you threw that question to me, the first thing I thought of was the world sort of boycotting South Africa during apartheid, and the effect that had, that they weren't able to play rugby or cricket on the world stage, and it forces their hand a little bit in the end. If their people want to play sport, want to watch sport, and see their best sportsmen in action, they need to come to the table. So I think in general, I'm very much in favour of using sport as a sort of a tool in these situations to try and get peace. I guess that's what we're all after. So anything that pushes us further towards that is good. It remains to be seen what else will happen, but I think it's just not possible for sporting leagues and sporting codes to hold events in Russia or around Russia at this time, and I think that's completely fair enough.
I think many people will agree with you there, Dadsy. Now, we're on the home stretch here, Eddie Dads. Just talk to us about the scplaybook.com.au banner head.
So if you like your fantasy sports like AFL Supercoach, NRL Supercoach, BBL Supercoach, we're releasing content constantly that will help you pick the right teams that make your teams better. And so if you're into Supercoach and you like podcasts and you like reading articles, it's a really good site. It's a really good resource. We've got a lot of good contributors. Last year's runner-up from Supercoach is talking with me on the podcast this afternoon, actually, so that'll be great. Podcast websites, scplaybook.com.au. And thanks for the plug, mate. I really appreciate it.
He's a bit of a star, isn't he? We'll have to get him back. Eddie Dads, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, the Australian and North American sports guru based over there in Sydney. Dadsy, you look after yourself. We'll have you back on the flow soon. Thanks so much for joining us on the Sports Fix.
Thanks, Ellis. Appreciate it.